USAID was their cash flow. So the first thing Powell did was take away their leverage. Now they're taking away their cash flow. Now they got to spend assets. And Trump is simultaneously going after their assets. It's very clear that the goal is re-entering the banking system because trust across political borders is falling. Where does this end? It ends with a massive reduction, 15, 20, 30% of the federal government at a minimum.
Are we truly headed towards a more peaceful, cooperative world?
If you get rid of and bankrupt the people who have been financing divide and rule through currency arbitrage for the last 400 years, yes. That's what I've been saying.
Is it really happening? Is this the Great Awakening, the Great Unraveling, the Great unveiling of the grift and the corruption that's existed in the U.S. federal government for some time?
Track C is kind of cool, isn't it? The whole Philip K. Dick thing, right? Track C, we're on Track C, and Track C is kind of cool. Yeah, it's happening. I mean, we haven't really even begun the process, I don't think. I mean, we got 60,000 people took the buyout option, and then he fired another 10,000, anywhere from 10 to 13,000 people. The numbers yesterday, Reuters said there was 10,000 people that worked at USAID. I heard 14,000 coming from Marco Rubio. So, I'm thinking Reuters is going to, of course, do what they would always do, which is to try and make the number as small as possible to say, oh, look, it wasn't really that many people. Oh, no, it's that many people. Yeah, it's happening. And the first part of this is really good, right? It's, we're getting, they're going to cut $1.3 to $1.5 trillion out of the budget. I mean, when I hear people using talking points that I've used, I think I've used even on your show, like going back a year, saying, hey, why don't we just go back to the 2019 budget? Would that be cool? No, I didn't get that on my own. I got it from Rand Paul. He said it right after COVID. Why can't we go back to the 2019 budget, right? Because he always puts forth this thing every year. But Rand's not wrong about that. Senator Paul's not wrong about that. It's look, why don't we just go back to the way we spent money before COVID?
The All-In guys were talking about it last week. They ran with that. The All-In guys ran with that line last week. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is, and I think the strategy of going for USAID first, going for the jugular, full-on blitzkrieg, we're not even 3 weeks into this. It feels like we've had a year's worth of activity. Yeah, no, seriously, you're right. The USAID was the jugular, because that puts everybody who's guilty in Washington on their back foot. I mean, when you see Elizabeth Warren, I just watched a 20-second clip of her walking through the halls. Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren, we love you. What do we do? She's like, call your senators, call your day. You can see her on the verge of tears, right? And that's the kind of fear dogs can smell from a mile away, right? She's worried. She knows that she's one of these people. And I also think she happens to be stupid enough to believe that this was the right way of going about things. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is a special kind of, arrogant and stupid, right? I don't know, Marty. I just know that when you see them trying to storm the Department of Education, which is mostly a canard, they're going after Hegseth last night at 11 o'clock announced that on Twitter that they're going to do an audit of the DOD. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So there's the DOD. Department of Education is probably going to go away. We've already lost 60,000 people there. The CIA has been offered a complete buyout, right? We don't know how many of those people took the option. We don't know how long that option was for. We just know that it was offered, at least as far as I know. If you know more than me, then I'm happy to, be wrong about that. And so, where does this end? It ends with a massive reduction, 15, 20, 30% of the federal government at a minimum, right? And maybe more. And then everybody who doesn't take the buyout, who listens to their union rep, who says, no, you got to hold the line against Trump. Great, thank you. Your terms are acceptable. Now we can fire you for cause when we find out that you approved this payment for this treasonous thing or this thing, or, like, how about Chelsea Clinton, $84 million, right? And 10 of which was spent on her, on her wedding and her house, or 13 of which was spent on her wedding and her house. I want that money back. Like, that money needs to be clawed back from Chelsea Clinton, payable, net 30, and then 8% and an 8% fee. And 8% in arrears. Like, I would be charged if I was, a week late with my quarterly tax payments. Like, same thing. Like, excuse me, claw it back. You don't get that money. Like, the taxpayers don't get to pay for your goddamn wedding and your house. You talentless fuck. Like, no. Like, this is ridiculous. And we all need to be properly outraged about all of this and start demanding our money back. I've noticed in my corner of Twitter over the last 24 to 48 hours, and it's propagating, which is everybody's like, I want a tax refund for this. Like, why did I pay taxes all these years?
Yeah.
So, and let that energy build. And it's going to be really easy for Trump to go, yeah, we're putting on tariffs that are big enough to fund the federal government. We're cutting the federal government down to size, and we're getting rid of the IRS.
And he's been choreographing it like very meticulously over the last few months. Mm-hmm. And that's, when it comes to USAID, it basically unearthed things that everybody knew, but you didn't have the hard evidence. You didn't have the flow charts, the payments, and there's something visceral about being able to go through the database and see all the payments, what they were targeted towards, and the ultimate goal of the LLCs that they were pointed to, or 501(c)(3)s they were given to. And then Cernovich has been doing an incredible job of going and finding the salaries of all the people at these entities. And it's we've known it, but now we have the hard proof, and it's an overt. It's the largest heist in human history when you
without a doubt. Yeah, no, without a doubt. And Mike Benz, we all have to give we owe a debt to Mike Benz. And I think that it was funny when Mike first hit the scene, at a time when, is Tucker Carlson a limited hangout, this, that, all these things that swirl out in the zeitgeist. And you always, we all, my attitude towards this. Somebody new shows up on the scene, distrust but verify. Like, he sounds like a great guy, but help if I know if he's on the up and up or not. But I'll say this about Mike. I think it's clear now that Mike was sent out as advanced recon to teach everybody how to do the forensic accounting, how to do the dives, how to trace everything out, and then basically crowdsource all the work so that when they go out strategically, Musk comes out, or they say we say something along the lines of, "Look, we know you've been, Senator Warren. We know you've been, you took money from the pharma company." He says, "No, I haven't." Blah, blah, blah. And then some guy on Twitter shows up with the $5.5 million that you got from some pharma company, and like, boom, immediately in the community notes, done. And it's not Mike Benz that had to do it. It's not one guy. He's crowdsourced this. Now we have hundreds of thousands. This is the same kind of thing you and I have been talking about for years. Like, it's like, and when I say about me, right? Like, I sit at the top of a group of people, small community, an intentional community that is motivated to change the world, right? And to have their voice heard and realize that, at a certain level, we all have we have conduits through which we can get our ideas and we can get our work promoted, right? We can get our, the observations that they see. There's no way I can do this stuff on my own. Any more than, maybe Mike Benz doesn't sleep at all. I don't know. But I have a life and a wife and a daughter and, things that I like to do with my life. And so ultimately, when you inspire people to want to do good work and to go find the money trail and go, find the information or come forward with their observation at their job or their this or wherever or their business, all of a sudden that information filters into someone like myself or you or any of these other people. And then it just percolates through the zeitgeist in a decentralized manner. And there's no way for them to stop it. And it's, it's so unbelievably impressive. And I don't know about you, but it's inspiring. I want to get up in the morning and talk about this shit like every day. You know what I mean? I don't know about you, but I'm like, I can't smoke enough of these in victory. It's crazy, So
well, it's not only inspiring, it's a huge sigh of relief, because we've been talking, like, Trump won 2016 and 2020. It was like, all right, we're going to drain the swamp. And then obviously COVID happened, and he did not know what to do once he got into the Oval Office, got surrounded by the swamp creatures themselves. And it was, I think everybody would agree on our side of the observation of what's been going on, that it was a bit lackluster and a bit disappointing. But this time around, it's like, all right, learn the lessons. They stole the election in 2020, tried to kill him leading up to this election, and equipped himself with a team that is able to actually get shit done. And they're doing it. We're not even 3 weeks in, and more has been unearthed than the last 50 years in terms of the corruption in our government. And the other part is like this crack team of Elon Zoomers that have come in, and it's literally 5 of them that know how to operate system admins and data sets and quickly surface all the pertinent data. And it's like, this is how everything should be run.
Well, this is the thing. This is the funny part about all this, right? I was gonna think about it. Trump's partnering with little tech. This is what this means, right? This is what, when those guys realized that they had no future, with the Andreessens and the Musks and the this, and all of them, and I would even put Zuckerberg in this category, when there was no future with the status quo, because they were all going to be made into be the scapegoats, the bad guys, right? Like Jack Dorsey was the scapegoat for all the fuckery that went on Twitter for all those years, right? So I have a much different view of Jack Dorsey than a lot of people do, because I do really think that Jack was made out to be the scapegoat. He was a captured pawn on the playing field of what Twitter was before Musk took it over. Now apply that model to all these other guys, right? And the same way I've argued about the banking system, about many of the banks, the major banks. Like, look, when globalism was ascended, what do? They have a fiduciary responsibility to their companies, and they go ahead and they make the best of a bad situation. So they go from net interest margin banking to casino investment banking to levering stuff up because we're at the zero bound, and you go along to get along until and unless we get to a moment where there's an existential threat to their final threat to them as a group of people. And then when they see their opportunity to start changing the infrastructure of the banking system and the way we handle money, which is the whole argument about LIBOR and converting it over to SOFR and then all the other things that go along with that, they took their opportunity. They put the right guy in at the Fed. They then put the right guy in at the New York Fed. They got it all done. And then, I'll let that percolate behind the scenes and let that, slowly and effectively change U.S. monetary policy. Well, we got the same thing here, right? Trump partners, the little tech guys, realize that, there's no future for them in Klaus Schwab's digital future. It's not going to be them. They're going to lose because Google and Microsoft and all the rest of them are going to win because they've got the game board tilted to their advantage. So they all back Trump. It's exactly what Andreessen said during the Joe Rogan podcast. It's like, what do you do when you see all that? You back Donald Trump for president. And so they then probably came in with a plan to Trump to say, look, we can do this. We can go in with a very small team. We got to structure it properly within the federal government so that the legal I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And then you can go in and do what needs to be done. And it's clearly what they've done. And they had a plan and they executed brilliantly to this point.
Yeah. And we're only at the beginning. That's been the fun thing this week, having been to some events where a lot of these little tech guys are. I actually went to dinner last night with a friend and we were talking about this after dinner while I was waiting for my Uber. But the kvetching this week is that the Republicans have come in, they're targeting the liberals and they're trying to destroy. But I don't think people really, the people screaming that, appreciate the full rounded picture. It's like, this is just the first step. Yes, it is unearthing a lot of the shit lib woke sort of agenda and how they've operated, but it's not going to be confined to the left side of the aisle. Like, particularly, you mentioned it, Hegseth, going to the DOD, and whether or not this is viewed as corruption or crony capitalism or crony state, private state partnership, whatever you want to call it, a lot of these little tech guys are heavily invested in the emergent defense tech. And I've been at these events, and the way the defense tech venture capitalist and private equity guys are talking, They're thinking like the Andurils of the world can literally they can do what the current defense contractors are doing with an $800 billion budget with an $80 billion budget. Not only can they do exactly what the defense contractors are doing now, but they can do it better and smarter.
Yeah. So, okay. Not that I'm great. I mean, from an efficiency perspective, I'm not, I don't want to make war more efficient.
No, and I agree. Like I've grappled with this too, but like from like a taxpayer side, it's like if you can cut costs by 90%.
But let's start with the cutting the taxpayer. This is part of the worry that I've had about AI and all of this stuff for quite a long time is I don't talk about it very much, but Dexter White and I talk about it a lot behind the scenes. We have long conversations about, where this could be headed if we're not careful and how we handle it. It can be a very dark future, and and I give her a lot of shit for this, but I will give her some credit on this. This is part of what's animating Whitney Webb and what she's been doing. But at the same time, I think I think not ever taking the positive side of the equation, I don't think is a particularly balanced way to present the information, right? Like, again, it's always doom and gloom. It's always going to be meet the new boss, same as the old boss, with a certain type of decentralist or libertarian or whatever the hell you want to call them. And personally, I just think it's, having been in having been in that community for most of my adult life now, I can tell you that there's an awful lot of I hate to use, I'm going to use the word very specifically. I think there's a little bit of envy here. And jealousy is an aspirational thing. I'm going to go right back to Dr. Gary North on this. That jealousy is looking at a guy with the Ferrari and going, I really like to have that. Wouldn't it be great if I could figure out a way to get there? And then you're supposed to be inspired by that guy to go get it, right? That's what jealousy is. Envy is you look at the guy with the Lamborghini and you say, fuck him, I don't want him to have it. And I think that a lot of doctrinaire libertarians and doctrinaire decentralists are having a real problem with that. I think this is been my rant about this stuff for a while now. I talk about it, and philosophically, I talk about it in the fight between Bitcoin maxis and gold bugs. It's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of. I think no, we don't have to choose between them. We're going to let the assets and let the people choose for themselves what they want. And if Bitcoin's better, Bitcoin's better. And if gold is better, then gold is better. Or maybe gold is better in one context and Bitcoin is better in another context, and they complement each other. And why can't we have that conversation? I've been, you actually do show up on my Twitter feed every once in a while. So I actually get to see some of the things that you post. And you posted, I think, I was flipping, I saw one of your posts recently about 20 minutes ago. And it was basically that, because all the talk right now is how the Bank of England can't deliver gold, and now there's a big blow up, and there's a potential big blow up in gold and all this other stuff. And to watch a smart, connected Bitcoin guy say, no, gold has a role here, and we should be watching this very carefully, especially when our Treasury Secretary's biggest position is fucking gold. Like it or not, folks, like that's going to be, gold's going to be part of the sovereign wealth fund. And we should celebrate that in every way, even if we're Bitcoin maxis, which I'm not. Yeah. But but even if you are, you should celebrate it, because it's the move towards hard assets and bare assets that's going to deleverage the system, and it's a part of our attack, their attack on USAID. The National Endowment for Democracy, I believe, is on the table next, or if not next, then somewhere in this mix. And we're going to, watch the whole process, and it's going to be, and we're all benefiting from this. And we don't have to be purists about it. And
completely agree.
Things play out.
What's up, freaks? This is Nat you don't want to skip, because Fold has a great offer for you. Everyone knows about Fold, the app where you can earn the most Bitcoin rewards for everyday purchases. I did this yesterday. Me and my wife, we use Amazon to buy quite a few things. And instead of just putting our credit card into Amazon and buying there, I put my credit card into Fold and buy an Amazon gift card and upload it to Amazon. Why? Because I get the credit card points and then I get sats back. Yesterday I bought a gift card. I made 10,181 sats, about $10.50 in Bitcoin. And it's the only way to do it. If you want to stack Bitcoin passively, make sure you're using Fold gift cards. Fold has a special deal. I mentioned it earlier. If you're not shopping with Fold gift cards, you're leaving sats on the table. New users that sign up to Fold are going to get 20,000 sats in a welcome bonus with their first gift card purchase. So don't leave sats on the table. Sign up now at foldapp.com/Marty. Get those 20,000 sats, freaks. Sup, freaks? This rip of TFTC was brought to you by our good friends at Bitkey. Bitkey makes Bitcoin easy to use and hard to lose. It is a hardware wallet that natively embeds into a 2 or 3 multi-sig. You have one key on the hardware wallet, one key on your mobile device, and Block stores a key in the cloud for you. This is an incredible hardware device for your friends and family, or maybe yourself, who have Bitcoin on exchanges and have for a long time, but haven't taken the step to self-custody because they're worried about the complications of setting up a private public key pair, securing that seed phrase, setting up a PIN, setting up a passphrase. Again, Bitkey makes it easy to use, hard to lose. It's the easiest 0 to 1 step, your first step to self-custody. If you have friends and family on the exchanges who haven't moved it off, tell them to pick up a Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world, use the key TFTC20 at checkout for 20% off your order. That's bitkey.world, code TFTC20. And that gold, whether Bitcoiners want to acknowledge it or not, it is the first alarm bell. Like what's happening between LME and COMEX right now, what's happening in reverse repo. And you just look at how Bitcoin's been trading for the first 2 months, relatively flat, chop solidation. The alarm bell signals are starting in the traditional markets, particularly gold.
Yeah, in the traditional markets. Yeah, agreed. I've been watching the gold market every day since 2001. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't check the gold price, except for maybe Saturdays when I've already saw it on Friday, and it doesn't change on Friday. It doesn't change on Saturdays. But I mean, every day I check the gold price. I look at the charts every week. We do this with the patrons twice a week. We do gold, silver, Bitcoin, oil, and the U.S. German 10-year spread, and the Dow, and a variety of others. And so I'm watching this stuff on a regular basis. I watch about 14 or 15 really important markets that all have, cross currents with each other. The euro, the yen, the euro pound cross, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? And I do that in order to try and see what capital's doing, because Martin Armstrong rightly has taught us that, capital moves first, and then we find out about what's going to happen next. So, in this case, in order to break their leverage cycle, right? The cycle of using cheap money and levered up cheap money as a means by which to fund forever wars and color revolutions and all the rest of it. That the gold market's part of that. This gold suppression system is part of that, because Bitcoin may be the end of the story, but gold is currently still the story. Okay, right? It's still the story, because that's how the general market and how all the capital adequacy rules for Basel III and how the banking system operates and how the people hedge their FX risk for real capital markets, they use gold still. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And, Bitcoin may be making inroads into that. And certainly that's a welcome development, but it's not the whole market. So, don't put the cart before the horse. Understand how the rest of the world outside of your little solipsistic or meocentric universe operates, and realize that there's a big world out there, and there's tens of trillions of dollars moving through the Forex markets every day. And I got news for you. A lot of people are hedging their risk with gold. And if they're actively suppressing the gold price, it's in order because they're trying to protect their other assets, and they're lower quality assets than gold, even if you think gold is a lower quality asset than Bitcoin. Right. Yeah. And this is not a black or white thing. This is not I can prove to you with logic that Bitcoin's better than gold, therefore Bitcoin will win. It's not part of the argument. It's not what's going on a daily basis. At the end of the day, if a fund manager has to, he's got a prospectus that he's got to follow. He's got a plan he has to follow. There's nothing he can do about it.
Yeah, and as Bitcoiners,
a lot of people just don't understand this.
No, and as Bitcoiners, you just objectively observe what's happening, and it's impossible to refute that this is what's happening, and it's not a bad thing. It just is.
No, it's not a bad thing at all. It's an excellent thing. I mean, to break the Bank of England, Marty, you understand that breaking the Bank of England, I mean, for real, not the fake breaking of the Bank of England that George Soros did back in the 90s, which Scott Bessent was part of. That was an operation. I hate that phrase, George Soros, the man who broke the Bank of England. Bullshit. George Soros was empowered to break Margaret Thatcher's government to get the UK into the European Union. That's what that operation was for. Okay. It was never about breaking the Bank of England.
That makes much more sense now. I've never heard.
No, Richard Poe has done all the forensic work. George Soros literally works for the British government. Always has. The man wrote, the Richards wrote a comprehensive and definitive with sources article explaining all this. It's on his Substack. Richard Poe, POE. If you have not interviewed Richard, you really should. Wrote a series of articles. The first one was how the British invented George Soros and blamed it on the Jews. And the next one was how the British invented communism and blamed it on the Jews. And then he wrote an entire book explaining it all. Like, it's not, this is it, and he's, even if his argument isn't holistic in terms of everything that's going on, this is an angle on which to look at, reframe what you think you know, and look at the world that way and go, wow, maybe that's a big part of this. Then we go back to things like Bernard Connolly's The Dark Heart of Europe, The Rotten Heart of Europe, I'm sorry. If you read that book, you will understand how important it all was that Thatcher's cabinet betrayed her in order to push for the integration of the European Union. The globalists, the British establishment, and is split at the top, just like ours is. There are globalists and there are, old British imperial remnant. And then there's the Britons themselves who are getting fucked by both of these people. Both of those factions, right, believe fundamentally that they want to maintain the vestiges of their colonialist empires, right? The British, through the City of London, the British remnant wants to do so through the preservation of their control over maritime sea routes, their legacy relationships in all of their colonies in the United States and India and all around the world. And on the other side, you have the globalists who want to transfer that power to the European Union. Okay, and they both agree on two things. One, the United States needs to be destroyed. And two, Russia needs to be destroyed. Okay, but then what they're really fighting about is who gets to be in charge after that's done. Now, neither of those things, those precepts, those prerequisites for their maintaining power are happening. And that's why I can't smoke enough cigars and eat enough steak right now. Okay, so there we are. Okay.
Well, let's dive into what's happening in the LME at the Bank of England with the gold right now, because if I recall correctly, there was a similar situation that arose in 2020, and people were pretty convinced at that time that, like, all right, this is it. Everybody's calling their bullion in kind and it's going to break it. But obviously money printing happened. Animal spirits were quelled and it didn't happen. Like, is this it? Are we going to see something similar this time around?
No. And the reason that it happened last time was because one, there's two things. Back 2020, SOFR was not the law of the land in the United States. Our debt was still, there are many debt contracts that were out there, mortgage-backed securities, credit revolvers, interest rate swaps and all the rest of it, were tied to LIBOR. That's one. Two, at that moment in time, we had a seizure of the U.S. Treasury market. In the couple times that I spoke to Daniel DiMartino Booth in 2021, it was the last time I've actually spoken to Daniel. I haven't spoken to her since. 2023, when I had Daniel on the podcast a couple of times. And the things that I came out of that were that the only thing that will make the Fed react like they did in 2020 was if the Treasury market goes business. They will always come in to defend the Treasury market. They do not care about the stock market. Certainly Jerome Powell doesn't. Maybe Alan Greenspan did, but never Powell. So I don't have like the chapter and verse as to how and why the Treasury market went bidless, but I can tell you that it did, and that forced Powell back to the zero bound, do a round of QE. The CARES Act came into being, and that was that, right? And Powell's spent the last 4 years, almost 5 years now, trying to undo all that, and he has somewhat successfully done that. We now have a Fed balance sheet that's smaller than it was before COVID. So QT has stripped all of that off that froth off of the Fed's balance sheet. He continues to run QT in the background. And everything else since then, since 2022, that was why he was able to raise rates. When SOFR comes into effect in 2022 is why he was able to raise rates and start draining the world of all of its leverage. And that left, that told everyone, it certainly told the world and anybody with real money to invest where the real power in the world resided, which is in the United States, not in Europe. Europe does not control the financial markets. We control the financial markets because our economy, as bad as it is still more dynamic and more capable of handling a higher cost of money than everybody else is, which is why everybody else has been doing yield curve control, including our formerly treasonous Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, on their behalf, while we, held interest rates higher than anybody ever thought we could. So I don't think the Treasury market's going to go bidless here. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. Since Trump's come to power and starts fixing all the fiscal side of things, right?
Yields are going
Treasury
lower.
Market's coming down.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you would expect, right? And so I'm like, he's creating a bid on all the things that I said 3 years ago when you and I first talked, and I've said on 100 podcasts, like the mechanism by which, like, the world wants the United States to get its fiscal house in order, and they'll shower us with tens of trillions of dollars. Why? Because we still have the best contract law in the world. We still have the most advantageous tax policy for everyone else in the world. All Trump has been saying is, we're going to make it better. We're going to give you do it here in the United States, and you get the same corporate tax rate that everybody else gets. I do a terrible Trump thing, but come on, it'll be beautiful, huge. It'll be good for you. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, it's so obvious. And I've talked to a couple of businessmen that I'm friends with, and they're like, the trade shows, and they're like, dude, you have no idea how much money is desperate to come into this country. They're so ecstatic. I'm like, mm-hmm. And so many people in this part of the commentariat still want to believe that the dollar is going to zero. And I'm like, no, we're going to repair the balance sheet of the United States, and then fuck you. It's going to be, and Trump's not wrong. It's going to be a golden age, not just for the United States. Because if the United States wins the ideological fight between the private versus public formation of capital, meaning commercial banking versus central banking, government control of the flow of money versus the private markets controlling the flow of money, if they win that, and that is a subset of the real ideological fight, which is communism, and where the state is ascendant over and sovereign over the people, versus, or call it communism, call it monarchy, call it whatever you want, versus a system of government where the people are sovereign and the government is subservient. That's the ideological fight. And when you listen to people like Elizabeth Warren, when you listen to people like Klaus Schwab, you listen to all of these people, it all comes down to that same basic thing. The government should be, government spending is sacrosanct because the government should be superior to the people. Like, we're not tax cows. Like, not anymore. No. Well, not yet. We're slightly lower. We're slightly less. We're slightly leaner tax cows than we were yesterday or the day before. We have a long way to go. But yeah, there it is.
I mean, I've been tweeting it out. I mean, you were mentioning it earlier on the refunds, but like at the very least for this year, like tax holiday, like pause it. Like it's become obvious that they're stealing our money, lining their own pockets. Like, let's start with this tax holiday, dip the toes, have the conversation, ultimately realize, yeah, we should abolish the IRS.
Yeah.
Do these tariffs.
Yeah.
But back,
like if the tariff revenue starts to come in, then for every dollar that, like, if we can balance the budget, let's just do some basic math here. And we have about $750 billion worth of play, because about that much is going to roll off the Fed's balance sheet and not be reinvested, right? That's so there's about a $750 billion buffer that we have just in QT. If you go look at the Fed's balance sheet and go into the Fed's balance sheet, the H.4.1 report every week, and you'll see how many U.S. Treasuries are going to mature within the next 6 months or the next year. And it's about $750 billion. So we could run a $750 billion deficit, right? And the net debt of the United States will stay the same.
I thought it was much
because
higher
the Fed
than that.
won't buy those treasuries back. They will roll off and they won't reinvest them. And then, so net. So if we can cut, $1.5 trillion from the budget, and we can raise revenue in other ways through tariffs or whatever, then why can't we radically lower people's taxes? Why can't we give them a partial tax holiday for this year? Why can't we, have everybody calculate their taxes over the next 2.5 months and then turn around and say, yeah, but, then you're going to subtract, 10 to 20% off the top of your tax bill. Whatever that is, then subtract 20%. Or, knowing the government, what we'll wind up doing is we'll pay up front and then they'll send us a check for 20% back later in the year or at the end of the fiscal year in October. I'm okay with that too. Or give us a tax credit for next year for the money that that the government doesn't need.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's absolute. I don't know that that's part of the plan. I think the other part, there are other ways to do this. They're going to be focused this year on various plans to recapitalize the entire country and to mobilize the savings that we actually have within the economy and get it moving again. I think that's what they're going to do. That's really their focus more than that. But it would be a big psychological lift to everyone if we push for tax refunds from the waste and the fraud. And we clawed back, even if we just clawed back some symbolic amounts of money, right? I'm okay with that. Let's claw back. Let's claw back $10 million for Chelsea Clinton's house. It's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. The U.S. government farts that on a daily basis, but who cares? It's symbolic. It's important. It energizes people. They want to go out and they go, oh, it means this. Oh, we're going to do that, more of that?
No, it means we're actually getting justice. I completely agree. The symbolism of, no, Chelsea Clinton, you don't get $84 million from the slush fund. Send it back, please. It's like, all right, there's some justice there, some accountability that many people have known to be lacking for many decades now. And I think the reintroduction of accountability to the system would be an incredible symbol.
It really would be. I mean, I sat here for 2.5 years saying to people, look, we can cut spending. Like, it's like 85 or 90% of the federal budget is, I'm like, I saw last night, initial reports, $100 billion in Medicaid and Medicare fraud. But that's part of that 85% of, spending that we can't touch.
Yeah.
Right? Really? You think there's not more than $100 billion worth of Medicare and Medicaid fraud over the last 40 years? I'm not taking the under on that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and
I'm taking the points. Like,
Elon tweeted 3 days ago, like, we're going after Medicaid next. And the pearl clutching has been hilarious to watch. Like, he has your tax information. It's like, so does Equifax. So does everybody. It's all been leaked.
So does everybody on the planet. Like, I can't, I can't apply for a credit card anymore without 2 years worth of proving that I have salary and I paid my taxes. Like, they want my tax information for getting a fucking credit card anymore. Like, no, I'm overstating it a little bit, but not much.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to get a mortgage together for my house. to a construction loan together to build a house. My wife and I want to build in Tennessee. And I'm like, and I fought with the lender just a little bit. And I said, they wanted the income statements for, my LLC. I'm like, my LLC is my employer. So you're asking me for the tax records of my employer. I noticed how you asked for my LLC, but you didn't ask for Newsmax's because I'm employed by them too. And I just push back on the guy. I'm like, I'll give you the information. It's like, I don't care, but it's wrong. This is the money I have reported on my 1040. It's real and it's durable, and there it is. I mean, it doesn't matter. The LLC is effectively a pass-through entity. None of that matters. What matters is that it's none of your fucking business is what matters.
I have the money. It's here. You want to do this?
I have the money. I have the income. I have the cash flow. You can see the money flowing into my bank account. Like, I gave you access to my bank accounts, for Christ's sake. What else do you fucking need?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Are we going to is this going to be an episode of South Park where I get an anal probe too? Like,
This rip was brought to you by our great friends at Unchained. As Bitcoin's role in the global financial landscape evolves, understanding its potential impact on your wealth becomes increasingly crucial. Whether we see measured adoption or accelerated hyper-Bitcoinization, being prepared for various scenarios can make the difference between merely participating and truly optimizing your position. This is important, freaks. This is why Unchained developed the Bitcoin Calculator, a sophisticated modeling tool that helps you visualize and prepare for multiple Bitcoin futures. Beyond traditional retirement planning, it offers deep insights into how different adoption scenarios could transform your wealth trajectory. What sets this tool apart is the integration with the Unchained IRA, the only solution that combines the tax advantages of a retirement account with the security of self-custody. In any future state, maintaining direct control of your keys remains fundamental to your Bitcoin strategy. Go explore the potential futures at unchained.com/TFTC. Bitcoin is going up. Make sure you're protecting it the right way. Make sure you have a good partner. That is Unchained. Go to unchained.com/TFTC. I do want to bring this back to what's happening in LME right now. Like, how does this play out? Is gold about to rip? Is the Bank of England about to go under? Like, is this?
It's a good question. What I think is, I'm going to say, I'd like to say yes, right? I'd like to say, definitively, I don't know. Like, this is negotiation at the end of the day, right? Like, this is going to be pressure. And then there's going to be, there may be failure. I do believe that Trump and Bessent and Powell and others are, in effect, they're clawing it all back. Like, the first clawback comes there, right? The first clawback is get the gold, put up soft capital controls around physical gold and silver so that there's that there's only authorized movements of tonnage of gold and silver. Not, they don't give a shit about, some guy in Switzerland wanting to buy U.S. Eagles. That's not what they're, that's not what they're worried about. We're talking about when a central bank or something along those lines wants to buy 50 tons of gold from the U.S., from U.S. markets, that sale has to be approved. And because it has to go through a trusted intermediary. Now, that trusted intermediary on our end of it is JP Morgan Chase. They've been selected because they're the sole custodian of GLD. I think the COMEX is going to be, the COMEX gold futures contract is going to be depreciated to the point where you're going to have a split in the system. Let's just start there, and then we'll talk about the Bank of England. Because once you understand this, then you can understand what's happening with all the gold that's being moved into the U.S. Currently, people hedge their FX risk, their dollar risk in gold. They hedge their FX risk in gold all over the world. But, in dollars and domestically, they use the COMEX gold futures contract, most of which settle in cash. Most of what people don't really use the gold futures contract on the COMEX as a means to manage their as a means to procure physical gold and coordinate the production and sale of physical gold, which is what a commodity futures contract is supposed to do. It works that way mostly in oil, even though the Brent crude contract is mostly a financial asset as well, people speculating on the price of oil. But, like wheat futures and soybean futures and, iron futures and whatnot, those are all about, helping producers and consumers coordinate deliveries over time. That's what futures are for. They're very important. But they've gotten a really bad rap in the gold community because they're used, obviously, to lever up a big pile of paper gold relative to a small pile of physical gold in order to suppress the price, because you're creating a massive supply of available gold relative to the amount of gold that's available for delivery. So people are using 90% of the COMEX has always been people, hedging their FX risk with it. Well, if the COMEX is being drained of its supply, and effectively what we're in the process of doing is transferring the FX hedging portion of the gold market in the United States from the COMEX, where it's inappropriate for it to be done with the futures contract, and move it to options and options on futures in GLD. And there's no gold delivery there. Like GLD is clearly just a paper, exposure to gold, just like most of the Bitcoin ETFs are going to eventually wind up being exactly that. Most people aren't going to stand for delivery for their Bitcoins, right? But the Bitcoins hopefully have to be there. So I think that's what's going on. And Vince Lanci and I have been on this for over 18 months. We did a podcast literally 18 months ago, episode 154 of the Gold, Ghosts, and Guns podcast. Vince and I discussed this very thing explicitly for an hour and 15 minutes, where we said this is where we're headed. And now we're just watching it play out in real time. Now we're watching the next phase of it play out. So now let's transition back over to the LME and the Bank of England. The LBMA, not the LME. The LME is actually owned by the Chinese, right? So the LBMA, and Basel III have and now we got to bring in also Basel III. So what's happening there is the LBMA, because in London, in the city of London, there are different rules that apply in the city of London than they apply in the United States. We go back to John Corzine and MF Global, where Corzine was taking people's the collateral they were putting down to bet against gold futures contracts. They were merging all that, pooling it, sending that money to London, infinitely rehypothecating it, because you can do that in London. In London, you can infinitely rehypothecate. I can pledge collateral in a gold trade, a gold futures. I can use the gold against a gold futures contract they've taken out. You pledge that as collateral. Then I can take the contract and pledge that as collateral against a play against the Japanese yen. Then I can use the Japanese yen. I can use that collateral again to then pledge it as collateral against, Swiss francs or silver, and so there's this infinite scheme of using the same collateral 100 times to liquefy all of these trades. And this is what we're seeing is the unwind that's happening now. Basel III, and they were able to get away with this because the banks could use all of those contracts as reserves, right? Under Basel II. Under Basel III, that ends. Now they all of those contracts, all those unallocated pool account futures contracts have to be written to zero for the purposes of bank reserves and the determination of things like capital adequacy ratio and blah, 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 blah. The United States is finally implementing Basel III in July of this year. I first got on this story when it became a thing about 3 years ago. In 2021, when it became a big deal. Alistair McLeod wrote great articles explaining the guts of all this stuff. I commented on it as well. And what was happening back then, and now remember, this is before the coup against Liz Truss and the coup against the Liz's, and which occurred with a blackmail scheme by BlackRock to force the Bank of England into payment against these pension funds and the mini budget and all this stuff. But when that was occurring, so in effect, Davos didn't have control over England at that point, right? Because they didn't have their prime minister in place. They didn't have their king in place. They had Queen Elizabeth II and Liz Truss. Now, Liz Truss may be a neocon and all this other stuff, and I can firmly believe that she represents the old British remnant more so than Davos. She doesn't represent the Tony Blair, David Cameron wing of British politics. So when that was happening, the EU was demanding that Basel III be implemented by January of 2022. And that's when the story broke wide and Alistair MacLeod got involved in it. Everybody was now talking about the guts of Basel III and explaining it all. I've got an article on my website from that period in time as well. All this stuff has come back up into my head in the recent weeks because of the run on the LBMA and all that. So it was clear then that someone was making a move on the existing structure of the LBMA's gold contracts and the use of that as bank reserves and everything else. Then it was clearly an attack on that front. I don't know. I know that the Bank of England, I know that the English just said no, like that we're not doing that. And I don't remember how that all resolved itself, but eventually they just put off implementing Basel III from that perspective. And I think this is part of the story. I may be wrong about this, but this is at the very least I've given you like enough breadcrumbs here to try and figure out what the story is as to where this is, what the real story is. It's not just about the tariffs. The potential tariffs are important, but you can see it now that under Trump, now this whole system can be used as a means by which to break that old system. And all of the people in our commentariat who were screaming about this, you know where their allegiances lie, is all I'm going to say. Okay. And their allegiance is clearly the City of London. And I'm not giving you my opinion on those people at this point, on who those people are. But you should be able to do the work yourself. Okay.
Yeah. So the way I understand Basel III is a little fuzzy. Is it the reintroduction of the ability to use gold as reserves in the banking system, or the forcing?
And with a 15% haircut, yes. Gold will be a tier one. It's not fully a tier one capital asset. It's still, because of delivery times and fungibility and price and everything else, they've agreed to 85%. It used to be a 50% haircut, physical gold. And physical gold wasn't even allowed, right? It's now, it'll be 85%. So you have, you have $1 billion worth of gold. You can, write that off as 850 million as actual reserves, liquid reserves.
Is that part of what's happening? Are people preparing for that and calling gold in kind so that they have it in reserves? Or when that?
Because I think it's very clear that the gold is re-entering the banking system because trust across political borders is falling. It's falling, right? As Vince Launchy would put it, the return of mercantilism is here. We're putting up capital controls around the real hard assets, and they're not going to move. The financial assets can move around, but the actual, the hard bearer assets aren't going anywhere. And I think this ties in with the idea of why they want to create a sovereign wealth fund here in the United States, because we want to be able to have a savings account tied to the federal government, not to the Federal Reserve, that is separate. And again, I'm going to schizo post on you. Now I'm going to go out to where Tom really thinks we're going, which is to a domestically circulating, domestically held U.S. dollar, probably digital, not a central bank digital currency likely issued by the Treasury. But it will be domestically held and it will domestically circulate. Onshore yuan, offshore yuan. Onshore dollars, offshore dollars. And I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's part of the way they're going to activate the savings within the American society, be it our housing equity or our stashes of gold or whatever the hell it is, all of that savings. that's there, and there's trillions of dollars there that can be used. And if the United States government is running a surplus and is able to buy assets that are appreciating in value to build a sovereign wealth fund, that means that they can then use that as collateral to issue a domestically circulating version of the US dollar. And now I'm going to tie that to Judy Shelton's idea of gold-backed tips or gold-backed US treasuries. And that will only be available for U.S. citizens and U.S. corporations to buy and get paid in. And it'll be an asset. It'll be an asset of the people and a liability of the federal government, owed to Americans, not to the King of England or Klaus Schwab or the Rothschilds or this one or what. Pick your boogeyman of choice. That is what they're really worried about. I think that's the plan. And I don't have that on authority from anybody on the inside. This is just, again, me reading the tea leaves, me thinking through how would they go about the process of recapitalizing the United States and making sure that the wealth that's used to rebuild the United States and recapitalize the United States stays in the United States. And it's also why Trump is saying, hey, Canada, come on in. You've got resources. You've got things. Why we want Greenland. Why we want the fucking Panama Canal back. Why the Gulf of America, which tickles my balls in a way that is just makes every day I get up and I think Gulf of America and I giggle just a little bit. It's hilarious. But
it really is true. Yeah, we were on my weekly Bitcoin news show yesterday. We were talking about the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and obviously everybody's freaking out because of the announcement that Percent, Lutnick, and Trump made in the Oval Office, where they're talking about getting equity stakes in Moderna and TikTok. But I feel like that has to be a mirage, where it really, and this is the conclusion we came to, is exactly what you just said. It was like, all right, how would you build a sovereign wealth fund and make it so it's not dystopian and there's not like conflict of interest? And it would be like, all right, if you're running a surplus, you funnel the surplus into hard assets like gold and Bitcoin and hold it in the sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I think, and I also think future oil revenues, like part of what Trump, was talking about with this Gaza plan, which everybody freaked out about. And clearly what he was doing was a classic Trump Zopa thing and taking it all out of the current, the normal zone of potential agreement. Zopa.
BB looked so pissed off during that, which was incredible.
He did, didn't he? I just published an episode I did with Joaquin Flores yesterday, and Joaquin and I came to the same conclusion. There are other people who thought that BB was like grinning like the Cheshire Cat. There are other people who were like, Trump looks subservient. Like, bullshit. He was completely in charge and in the room. But you'll notice everybody started screaming about, you're doing ethnic cleansing and you're going to remove the Palestinians from their homelands. And no, what he's doing is forcing the situation open to the open and saying to everyone, okay, put up or shut up time. How important are the Palestinians how important are the Palestinians to you? And note, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, they're all starting to fall in line within hours.
They came out and said, we'll rebuild it. We're going to come in and rebuild it.
Which is exactly what everybody wanted, which is what Trump wanted in the first place. But Trump will be a part of it. The U.S. will be a part of it. And as I was talking with someone about this, and I think I was talking with my friend Halsey English about this on a space we did the other day, which unfortunately didn't get recorded, so it's lost to the ether. And what Halsey's point was the following, which was that only really the British and the Americans have the technology to go in and unlock profitably the offshore drilling necessary, all the gas and oil off Gaza. So we're going to be the ones that go in there to do this, and we're going to pull oil streams off, and we're going to pull revenue streams off of it, and we're going to help rebuild, and we're going to stop the violence, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to get our cut, and we're going to stick the profits from the oil and the gas, and we're going to stick it in the sovereign wealth fund. You're going to see it. You're going to see as well, I think, speaking of stuff like this, Trump is going to want repayment for some of the things that have been sent over to Donbass to fight the Russians. I think he's going to cut a deal. I think him bringing up the rare earths the other day and the other assets in the Donbass, I think in order to help rebuild Ukraine, in order to help Russia deal with what's going to be dealt, and all of that, he's going to cut a good deal for the United States to help do that. And he's going to pull some of that money out and stick it in the sovereign wealth fund. It's going to be part of the deal that he gets with Putin. Interestingly enough, everybody, all of a sudden, that Trump is now in office, everybody is now talking about how they're going to rebuild the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which I think an American investors are going to buy. The Russians are going to own the gas. We're going to own the pipeline, and Germany gets to pay for it. Which, by the way, satisfies the EU's ridiculous third energy package, where the same company can't own both the gas and the pipeline, which is why Nord Stream was organized. I followed this story like in grave detail for the whole time Nord Stream was being built. I mean, for 6 years, I covered every twist and turn of the story and how they were trying to stop this thing from happening. Because Nord Stream 2 comes out of the cancellation of South Stream, which then turned into Turk Stream. Blah, blah, blah. But it comes down to the EU third energy package, which the important point of that is that the pipelines coming into Europe, energy sources coming into Europe, have to be unbundled. The same company can't own both. So, for example, did you know how Nord Stream was eventually finalized? Originally, the deal brokered by Gerhard Schroeder, who was the CEO of the Nord Stream 2 consortium, former Chancellor of Germany, 50% owned by Gazprom, 10% owned by 5 different European oil majors: Shell, Uniper, Wintershall, OMV, and somebody else. I can't remember off the top of my head. Doesn't matter. The Poles, you guys know this, but the Polish Constitutional Court shot that down, and then they used that to say, no, that structure is illegal under the third energy law. So then what had to happen, and they thought, okay, cool, we've shut down Nord Stream 2. So what happened? The $9.5 billion that those guys were each going to pledge for their 10% of the company, they just loaned that money to Gazprom. Gazprom still owns, that thing owns the thing. They are then the financiers of Nord Stream 2. So that's the way that was actually structured. And, that's going to get sold probably to an American, probably as part of the settlement process.
Probably at a good discount.
It's going to get rebuilt. We'll give Putin a good deal on the rebuilding costs to pay, and he's going to give us a good deal on rare earths. And you can see the framework for a deal. It's just, parts of the negotiation.
I mean, everything you're saying.
Trump came out this morning and said he's going to speaking to Putin. Didn't say when. Yeah, I saw Zero Hedge tweeted it out about 11:30, I think, this morning.
It almost sounds too good to be true. Are we truly headed towards a more peaceful, cooperative world with all this?
If you get rid of and bankrupt the people who have been financing divide and rule through currency arbitrage for the last 400 fucking years. Yes. That's what I've been saying. That's why all the other, check your morality at the door. Unfortunately, I look at all this and it's hard if I stop for a moment and allow myself to feel, even remotely try to feel the pain that Ukrainian and Russian and Gazan and Israeli and Lebanese and Syrian, if I try to, and all of them, everybody's a victim here of these stupid fucking games played by literal fucking vampires. These are people who are absolute demons and have been stealing the wealth of the world at pennies on the dollar for centuries, and using a durable economic advantage through the current through an arbitrage over the cost of money that they put the legal frameworks around to bias to their advantage. They've been doing it, and then they use that to fund their divide and rule operations. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And I I look at this and I say to myself, someone finally had to like put this in front of Trump and say, this is what's been going on. And this is why MI6 created the Steele dossier. This is why this is why Carter Page. This is why they tried to frame you. This is why they rifled through your wife's underwear drawer. This is why they tried to debank your son. This is why this. And it finally all just, I think it just all hit him. Like this, 30 seconds after they tried to shoot him while he was on the ground. Instinctually, I think that's what happened. Instinctually, I think it all just kind of popped into his head.
Yeah.
And then it all just changes because, again, we're on track C at that point. The world decided, no, Donald Trump doesn't get to die. We don't want to live in that reality. We're moving into this eigenstate. Now I get all like spiritual and quantum mechanical on you, and things get weird, and everybody's like, oh, well, there goes Tom. He's lost his fucking mind now. Well, whatever. I don't care. Like, read The Invisibles, folks. Like, it's right there.
I'm very aligned with you on that stuff. Well, let's steelman this. How are they going to try and stop it?
You're far more I know you're far more spiritually like settled than I am. I'm definitely not a spiritually settled kind of guy. I'd like to be, but I'm just not. And I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. But go ahead.
Well, you mentioned there's been legal framework set up to facilitate the theft and raping of the world over 400 years. And just steelmanning this seems like the momentum is strong. The blitzkrieg is working. Everybody's on the back of their heels. But how are they going to, what are the facilities at their fingertips to try to stop this? And one thing I've heard this week is, particularly in the court systems here in the US, can some of these district judges step in and put a halt to anything that DOJ is trying to accomplish?
They can try that. And then eventually that will get fast tracked up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court will shoot it down, and then we'll move forward. What I'm going to say is the following. USAID was their cash flow. Like I made this point. Actually, I make this point in the podcast I just published to try and like put a fine point on it. I'll reiterate it here. Think about, I started using the term last year, Evil Corp Central. Right. And Evil Corp Central has a bunch of verticals in it. They've got Davos, they've got the British Remnant, they've got the Chinese, they've got this one, they've got that one. They're like, it's a loose consortium of people. Right. But it's all under the rubric of like, it's like Microsoft. There's the Windows division, there's the Office division, there's the division that nobody listens to, even though they make all the cool tech. You know what I mean? Like that's where the Zune and the Windows Phone and all that shit went to die, even though all that stuff was cool while Ballmer, milked his cash cows. But all those different verticals, right? They all get cash flow, right? Where was the cash flow coming from? Well, the NGOs. And the levering up of that money through City of London and all the things I've already talked about. So USAID was their, for lack of a better term, M0 of the globalist project, right? It's their cash flow. So that's on the income statement of the balance sheet. They get X amount of money that comes in every year at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer and other taxpayers. We're not the only ones. Europeans are paying a shit pot of money into this, and so is everybody else. Canadians, all of them. But we just know about the U.S. because, we finally had a revolution in the U.S. That's their cash flow, and they've been spending that cash flow on an annualized basis. Let's just say it's just the USAID money. $46 billion. I don't think that's true. I think there's probably $100 billion out of DOD and the Department of State and this one and that one, the CIA, blah, blah, blah. There's probably $300 billion a year goes out the door of U.S. taxpayer money that does this shit, right? Now, that $300 billion, for lack of a better term, is money that's being used to stop innovation. It's being used to stifle people from building wealth. It's to divide their societies. It's to fund color revolutions and flash mobs and this and that and all this stuff, right? All this wasted capital. This is money that's going to fund the tranny movement, the this and the that, all this crap that we're dealing with, right? So I want to ask a simple question. So if you get rid of that money, now they have to spend money out of assets, because they don't have any cash flow anymore. What happens when you lose your job? You got to spend out of savings until you find another job, until you find another source of cash flow, and then you live within the means of your cash flow. But having been unemployed to the point where I'm like, I don't know where my next job is going to be. No, honey, we can't go and get a hamburger. We have to go home and eat whatever's in the pantry. I literally had a fight with my wife one day in the car over this after I lost my job back in 2011. And I was like, because all I could see was money going out is money that can't be replaced. That's we have them at that moment. We've taken away their leverage. Now we've taken away their cash flow. So the first thing Powell did was take away their leverage. Now they're taking away their cash flow. Now they got to spend assets. And Trump is simultaneously going after their assets. Canada. Greenland. He wants to go after the EU. Like, do you understand? Like, that's the way they're thinking. And so what's their next move? They're going to spend out of cash. They're going to spend their assets. Putin did the exact same thing in how he prosecuted the war in Ukraine. He made us spend all of our money. And now we're at the point now where we have to start spending assets in order to keep funding the war. And they don't want, and the people were like, no, you're not spending any more of our wealth. We can't do this anymore. And he understood that political will and political power is downstream of the inability of the cash flow to cover the expenses. That's what a war of attrition is about. So that's how you beat these people. You force them to put their assets on the table. And then they're bankrupted. This is all metaphor. So, how much do they control in terms of assets? Is every day are you going to see you're going to see the crown like settle off another bit of colonial land that they still have claim to that nobody knew they had claim to, and then all of a sudden there'll be a headline somewhere buried deep on page 47 of Reuters or whatever about how the crown sold some land to the Argentinians back, or made a deal on that. That's them spending assets to maintain their current situation. So that's what I'm saying.
The globalists are under siege right now.
They are under siege.
Yeah.
So yes, Marty, to answer your questions in a word, we are on the verge of a better world if we understand the parameters in which this fake world was built, unfair world was built, and then how it's maintained, and then we just knock out the foundations.
I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you have, but it does seem like public sentiment, particularly on X, obviously it actually did permeate into CNN. I saw a clip. I was listening to the No Agenda podcast this morning, and they played a clip from CNN where, particularly about, I think it was like trans rights issues, or we didn't vote for Elon, even on CNN. I think they conceded both. They're like, most people aren't for spending money on getting women in or getting men and women sports. And people are saying that nobody voted for Elon are completely lying because he campaigned with Trump for 6 months. And that is explicitly what people voted for, was somebody to come in and cut the waste in the government. And it seems like there's a sentiment shift where there's momentum, everything's being laid bare, and everybody's like, call bullshit. There's no going back from this. Yeah, no, like, I don't know where, that's their Emily's List talking point for this week, and it's failed completely. And it's just not landing at all, because we're like, no, we actually did vote for Elon Musk. We certainly didn't vote for all these other things. He was literally on stage next to him for the last 6 months of the campaign. And then, he's been deputized. He's part of it. And I love the fact that I love what Trump did with Doge. He didn't just create it out of whole cloth as a non-governmental agency. He said he was going to do that. And then what he actually did was then he created a real department, which, by the way, they had all their, like Mark Elias and company had all their lawsuits all lined up to file them all against, to stop this. And then Trump makes it an official part of the government. So all those lawsuits have to be rewritten. Then go to find out that what he did was he took the existing U.S. Department of Digital Services and renamed it Doge, which was an Obama creation. Poetic justice, folks. As a writer, I'm like, damn, I'm jealous. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's really fun. I'm going to overdose on salt. I got to watch from the liberal tears. Like, it's just going to be hilarious. Well, that's why I think it's important to move on to Department of Defense, Medicaid, to unearth the swamp grift from the other side of the aisle. Just because that's like, I think the biggest problem is like the liberal Karens who have Trump and Elon derangement syndrome and think that it's an attack on their whole worldview. And
Elon derangement syndrome is really funny because that's EDS.
Yeah. Well, it's actually great for Trump too. They've got all the attention on Elon right now. And Trump's actually, like, Elon's going in, laying USAID bare, and Trump's in the Oval Office with 200 women signing a bill.
I know.
We're not going to let
it's just beautiful.
And in the locker room.
It's been amazing. And, you know, like, it's like they understand. They've clearly understood. They've mapped out, okay, well, if we do this, they're going to react like this. And so when they react like this, then we do this. And when they react like, then we know how they're going to react to that, so then we do this. And that's how they've been playing them literally since November 6th. And they keep falling for it every time because they don't have any other playbook. I think Trump is coming to liberate the entire West. I don't think this is just about America. I think he's coming to free the Scots and the French and the Germans and the Hungarians and the Little Britons and all of it. Little Englanders, all of it. I think he's the Irish. I think he understands what this means. He's striking the absolute root of this. If you want to put Israel back in the box, you have to remove the British and the French influence from the Middle East. There is no other way around it. You have to start there. And then once you do that at the same time, meaning if the United States were to pull out and Russia were to pull out of the region and leave it to its own devices, then the French, if the British remnant and Davos decide to, and the colonial and all the French and the old European continental Europeans could then move in and start playing their reindeer games that they always do. No, they have to be bankrupted at the same time in order to allow the Russians and the Americans to leave. You know, that's the order of operations that has to happen. So you have to attack both of them at the same time in order for that to happen. In order for everybody in the region to then be forced to deal with each other, which is kind of what he's already started doing with this deal, with this, free association about, hey, we're going to turn Gaza over, we're going to take control of Gaza thing, and then blah, blah, blah. So, and of course, all the libertarians went nuts and say he's going to put troops in there and it's going to be terrible. Like, well, no, we've got it all wrong.
It's fascinating that people have not picked up on his negotiating tactics this long, and 12 years in now at this point.
It's like he's been doing this for 45 years, folks. Why didn't you listen to everybody who's ever worked with Donald Trump?
He wrote a book.
Yeah.
That explains exactly how
he's better at it than any person has ever been. And he understands. He understands money. And he understands weakness. I watched a really good video with a person, I don't remember the woman's name, but she was talking about, she's like, I used to work with Trump. And there's nobody I've ever seen who can sniff weakness out of the person on the other side of the aisle, the other side of the negotiation, like Donald Trump. So he knows where their weaknesses are. He can walk in the room and figure out what your weakness is just by talking to you for 30 seconds. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how we're going to play this. And then he just shifts on the fly.
Yeah.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant at it. And he's like, it's so, and now he's like motivated. And he's motivated, and maybe he's motivated by personal aggrandizement. Maybe he's, whatever. Who cares? Who cares if he's a bad man? Who cares if he's a moral man? I don't care. I never have. I need the right guy with the right skill set to do the right job. Like, that's what I need. And, and we'll sit back and we'll watch him do what he's going to do. And when he makes a mistake, we'll hold him to it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Don't buy shares of Moderna. That's like, then don't force mRNA on me. Don't digital ID. Like, I'll draw the line there. But until those battles are materialized, like, he's crushing it right now. It's objective.
Yeah, he is. And maybe this is all kind of part of the shock and awe, and then the bait and switch comes later. If it does, then we'll come back 6 months from now and go, motherfucker, and then we'll do the thing, and then we'll grouse, and then we'll continue. And I hate to say it, we'll continue our grift, Because there's a certain level of, right? We'll continue our, I guess there's a certain level of grift in that, right? Like, you know, I'm not immune to it. Like, I'm not being, it is in effect a part of the thing. Like when we do these podcasts and we do these and we write our articles and we write our newsletters and we do our thing, we're doing the best we can with the information that we have at that moment in time. And, you know, I don't know about you. I know you do. And that's why I always come on your show, and I'm happy to. But, you know, look, I don't have an agenda other than let's make the world a better place.
Yeah, well,
right?
And it's much harder. There's much less stuff to talk about if we have Pax Terra at some point. Like we have a peaceful world.
You know, there will come a point where I've said many times, I'm like, I would love to do this job just long enough to put myself out of work. Yeah. Right? Like, well, the world's like really easy to figure out now. What the fuck do you need me for?
Yeah.
Like my skill set, let's depreciate this insane skill set that I have that I hate being abused by narcissists. To the point of like, if Trump can sniff weakness out because of his, I can sniff when I'm being abused, like emotionally abused and whipped by people. Like, I don't know about you, but this is like something like my superpower. When I sit down with my therapist and I talk about these things, I'm like, it's very obvious where this shit came from. Like, it's not hard. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I prep myself with my entire life up until this point and reinforcing that type of thinking to be better at how do I sniff that shit out as quickly as possible. And I surround myself with people who help me, refine that worldview and give me, and that's what I do. And I don't know if it's a superpower, it's a superpower. And if it's not, well, hopefully one of these days we can depreciate that skill set to zero where I have to go, I don't know, write books for a living or play bad jazz and,
go hang out with your goats, goats and other stuff.
Or go get a new herd of goats and then go hang out with them. Yeah. Be a bad dairy farmer like I used to be. Whatever. I don't care.
That's we talk about it, Matt Odell, who had co-host the weekly show and he's partner at the fund as well. And we talk about for the show, we're focus on Bitcoin news and education. We can't wait for the day where we can go do goats and other stuff and just not have to worry about showing up.
Wouldn't it be nice?
This. Yeah,
it really is. Because and again, I'm not going to I'm not grousing here in any way, manner, shape, or form. Just telling you, it's exhausting to do this shit this way. It's absolutely exhausting. Dexter White and I talk about this stuff behind the scenes all the time. We think back and the amount of time of our lives that we've spent thinking about these things and getting to this moment, right? Like, isn't it a tragedy that's in some ways, that's what we spent all of our brain power on, as opposed to building something brilliant? I used to be a chemist. I could have had an entire, track B for me could have been, high energy physicist solving fundamental problems of the universe. I was on that track. I'm here doing this shit. Well,
I'm happy. I would have liked to see you do the chemistry, the physicist stuff, but I think for the track that we're on, we didn't have the ability to choose it.
I appreciate
we handed it, and maybe that's God's intent for us in this life is, all right, we sent you souls down here to fix these problems, identify them, and then help fix them.
Help in whatever small way we can to do so, and inspire people along the way to say that guy's got, and you do it well enough that you inspire enough people to say, I want to support you in your mission. Yeah. Thank you. And to that, all I can say to everybody is, as I say all the time, thank you. I live it is an absolute privilege to do what I do. And I don't take it for granted. Every day I get up, I'm like, no, what else? What are you doing today? And then, are you doing enough? And they're like, and it's not even, at some point in the past, a long time in the past, there used to be a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? Out of necessity. Now, today, it's like, look, I don't, I just do what I do. And, I know what guy everybody expects me to be now, and I do what I can do. And, we're going to leave the rest of it up to what we can do and just to stay in business. But it is really nice, Marty. I will say this. It is really nice to wake up in the morning and go, I think the threat of being deplatformed is pretty much over. And that has changed. I don't spend nearly as much energy on that anymore. And so it's a little less exhausting to get up in the morning and do this stuff.
Yeah. Now
we can start to chart the path of how we, we're still in inning 1 or inning 2 of this fight. There's a lot of work to be done. And I'm not saying that as a salesman. I'm saying that that's what I think. So there's a lot more work to do. And we, still have to hold everybody's feet to the fire. And we still have to, prep the world to pass it on to our children. And we haven't done that yet. We have, and so when we get there, we'll, when that mission is finished, and then I can, hopefully I can walk away, with my head held high and, enough money in the bank that I don't have to, hoof it at 70 years old, like digging ditches and shit. It'd be nice.
Yeah, we're firmly in the disclosure phase right now. And that disclosure, acceptance, I guess reconciliation, and then rebuilding from there. There's a lot more phases.
We have a lot of work to do. Yeah, absolutely.
And it was funny, the Trump's goal to not only liberate the United States, but the broader West. You can see, going back to jealousy and envy, there's definitely a lot of jealousy beginning to bubble up in Europe of seeing what's happening here and being like, I want that. Please help me figure out.
Would that be great? I want that. And you inspire other people. I mean, one of the things I argued very early on in the process, when I first started, when I first went to work for Newsmax back in 2013, I was watching Putin move things. I was like, okay, I'm a gold guy. I'm a money guy. Okay, I'm gold and money theory guy. I'm a doctrinaire Austrian, yada, yada, yada. Fine. But then I'm like, okay, well, but that's not working. By the way, in 2013, depth of the gold bear market, that was not working. So eventually I start really looking at things geopolitically. And I had some moments where, previous to that, where it was like, oh, dude, you're missing a really important point here about the way the world actually operates. But what I realized was, we have to temper our commentary in the midst of that and then get better at that. And what I noted in the early part of that while studying Putin was when he made a move that was striking at the root of the existing power structure at that moment in time. And for me, I was in that anti-American phase or the anti-empire phase that we all go through on this. And I went, oh, Putin stood up to Obama in Syria. Putin stood up and moved people in, and then stabilized the situation in Syria. And I went, that's a moment where he walks in, steps up, tells the hegemon no, and doesn't get destroyed for it. That's inspiring to everybody around him. We're not here today if the neocons and the globalists didn't overplay their hand in Syria and Ukraine. Right? We're not here today. This is all part of the same story. All right. And so that's when that model hit my head. I'm like, oh, right. When Obama kicked Iran for the first time out of the SWIFT system, and I go back to the shit that Jim Sinclair used to talk about in 2005 and 2006 and 2008 about Obama threatening, or certainly in 2008 and 2010, threatening the Swiss with SWIFT expulsion over bank secrecy and opening up their bank secrecy laws. And Jim saying, look, you can't go nuclear in a negotiation. The minute you do, if someone calls your bluff, you've got nothing to fall back on. And Obama went there and put SWIFT on the table, which at that time was the nuclear option in financial markets. It worked out for him. But then when he put Iran and cut Iran out, and Iran survived, now the blueprint of how to survive SWIFT expulsion is put on the map for everybody to watch. When Putin stands up in Syria and when everybody watches how he's able to stand up, everybody goes, oh, cracks in the armor, kinks in the armor. Maybe they're not. Maybe this is more of a paper tiger than we think it is. Blah 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 blah. The whole system starts to die as a death of it by 1,000 cuts, and
it works in a fractal. That's what I'm hoping with what's happening now with Doge. Is everybody's like, you can't touch the budget, you can't touch the spending. It's like, oh no, let's actually cut it by 80%. Watch nothing material happen except for to those people who were simply stealing your money and move along without all this spending.
It's a version of what you just said is a version of me saying in 2022 going, we're going to race to 5.5 or 6%. We're going to find out just how wrong everybody is. They're saying that we can't go to 1% without the world breaking and Powell having to go back to the zero bound.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Shrink it down.
Same argument. And, I'm happy to have, had that insight and shared it with enough of the world that they saw it. And, we go from there, right? It's just, that's what this is all about. It's like, I'm not, when I put some of this stuff on the table, really what I'm trying to do is not just illuminate a particular insight about a particular thing. I'm trying to craft a mode of thinking and a mode of, like, how does that work in the symbolic logical level or symbolic level? So you can take that framework and go apply it over here or over there, and then go, oh, well, it's all the same thing over and over and over again. Oh, and look, they're reacting to it exactly the same way. And oh, look, it's the same story, just written slightly differently. Sometimes that's confirmation bias. Sometimes the model doesn't work. Fair. And then but by having a model at the very least, you can then test it. So.
Yeah. And I'll end it on this. I think, again, going back to poetry and the juxtaposition, it is laughable watching all the Gerontocracy in Congress and the Senate, like today at the Department of Education, screaming at the door and yelling at a ragtag group of 6 Zoomers who are coming in to fix the problem. Just like the juxtaposition of this old, decrepit, kleptocratic class trying to cling to power as they can't even get to the Zoomers at their computers, completely dismantling the system in real time is beautiful. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it's funny. I've had a couple of conversations with my daughter. She's 18. She's going to be 19 in April. And there's a part of her when it comes out every once in a while in our conversations. And she's worried about what's happening because she's not really, what's going on. And there are other attendant issues that she's focused on being 18 as opposed to what I'm focused on. But what's really interesting is you can hear it in the mindset and the ethos of they don't trust any of these fucking people. And that whole system they just absolutely detest in every way. And they're focused absolutely, on building something new. And, they don't even trust us to tear it down properly. And I'm a little bit like, okay, what would you like us to do? Well, I did have this conversation with her the other day. I took her out to lunch and we're chatting about it. I said, honey, we're not here to impose a new system on you. That's not going to be our job. In the grand story of humanity, your generation are going to be the ones that define what the new system is. And we're going to break shit. And we're probably going to break more shit than we should. Sorry. No one's perfect. Understand that we're just human. We have our biases. We have our imprinting, yada, yada, yada. But we are putting it in a position, we're putting you in a position and people like you in a position to build something better. And you're going to decide what that is. And you're going to take aspects of the old system. That's going to die. You're going to take aspects of the current system. Those things are going to work. You're going to look back. Some of you are going to look back to the old system. You're going to look back at the current system, which is a mess. But you're going to pick out the bits and pieces that work for you. I may not agree with those bits and pieces. And we'll probably fight about it until the day I, shuffle off the mortal coil. And that's fine. I'm still going to love you. And I'm still going to approve of you. More importantly. And then you're going to build a new system and I'm not going to be here anymore. So it ain't going to fucking matter. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. I did my very best. But what's important is, of course, you leave the lines of communication open as much as possible. You explain your reasoning as to why you're doing X, Y, and Z. And so that they are, and that at the very least alleviates their anxiety about what your intentions are, even if they disagree with you about the specifics.
Well, that's the beauty of the strategically, optically, symbolically of having this crack team of Zoomers under Elon. It's just like whether it's an olive branch or a mentorship, whatever it may be, like a signal to Gen Z, like we are bringing you along. You are part of this.
You're a part of it.
Only five of them.
We're going to need your help because we don't have those skills. Some of us have those skills.
The kid literally figured out what was in these scrolls.
I know that
were burnt in Mount Vesuvius. It's like insane.
Yeah, I know. Like, right. And like, look at this kid. Like, he's already done more in his life at 19 with his laptop and his 5 computers he's got in the freaking closet. And I'm like, I have. I'm like,
yeah, this is who I want.
They don't
there.
know what the fuck they're doing. These kids, like, they're fucking amazing. Oh yeah, no, it's when you look at them, and it's like, yeah, some of them are just amazing. I've met a couple of her friends over the years, and one of them just decided out of the blue, he's like, yeah, none of this is working for me, and he just started teaching himself how to code, and then he started creating stuff, and like writing hacking tools of in the video game space and whatnot. But he was doing all sorts of stuff that way. He was teaching himself, and now he's got he's got skill set that he's probably one of these kids, right? Like that guy. Interestingly enough, I've told this story before. My daughter just got her first job, and she's doing well, and she lucked into an unbelievable friggin' first job at 18 to over at the university, and. But she came home the other day and we were talking about it. She's like, I was talking with one of my coworkers, and I think it was like one of the friend of theirs or brother or whatever, is like, got hired on a construction crew, mud and drywall, like exactly the stuff that my wife was doing to renovate part of our house when we get it ready for sale. And she's like, exactly the same. She's making $55,000 a year. I'm like, we've been telling you. She's like, I'm thinking trade school. I'm like, yeah, yes. You don't have to be a fucking welder or anything, but there's plenty of them out there. Like, and she's actually thinking about that. Now this girl and I'm like, yeah, you go to work 4 days a week, and you do that, and on Tuesdays you go to your art class, and you keep working on your painting skills, and great, I'm okay with that. Like, you've got, if that's how you want to use your Bright Future Scholarship in the state of Florida, mazel tov. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. You know what I mean? And it was a very interesting conversation because I never thought it was going to come out of her mouth.
Yeah. And if your networking skills and your ability to communicate rubbed off on her in any way, maybe she gets interested in it, starts her own business, increases that salary.
I think she will. She will. She's very verbal. She's hilarious. I mean, she's legitimately hilarious. If you think I'm funny, like my daughter, she's just a fucking hoot, that one. And she's very, 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 very smart, whip smart. And, it was funny for a while. She was playing World of Warcraft with us. I play World of Warcraft with a couple of my patrons and fans, and we're on the classic, the new classic anniversary servers. So we hang out every night. But she was hanging out with us and just keeping us in stitches all night long. With these mix of millennials and Gen Xers. She's keeping us in stitches. And then then she fucked off and she's doing other things now. But it was fun for a couple of months. It was hilarious. It was just great. And
this has been great. And I'm just reflecting on the years long running conversation that we've had, and it is crazy how the tenor of these conversations gotten consistently more positive over the years, and hopefully it just continues.
No, and me too, because from the moment we started doing this, and I started at a place where I wasn't sure of what I was seeing at all, right? Oh, this guy with this novel idea about the Fed and I'm like, I don't fucking know if I'm right, but hey, I'm going to put it out there and let people chew on it, and then all of a sudden, and then you turn out to have been probably right about it all, and then you can watch and say, well, if that, then this, and this and that, and then we're here, some version of it, not all of it, but some version of it. You're like, wow, cool. I never in a million fucking years thought we've gotten more done in 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks, 3 work weeks of President Trump than I thought we were going to get in 4 years.
Yeah. Imagine what's going to happen over 4 years.
And if that's not a metaphor, if that's not the real benefit of AI, I don't know what is. It's not this hyper financialization model that these same shitbags that, have turned us into, adrenaline, noradrenaline addiction, FOMO monkeys, not even FOMO monkeys. And to think, no, it's not about that at all. How can they monetize it and financialize it, and then, pull an unearned income stream off it? These fucking rentier assholes. No, all of a sudden we're using it to do real things with. Like, this is what happens when you democratize technology and you put it in the hands of motivated people to do like the right thing, to do good and to do real things. Like the real revolution in AI is going to be at, in ways to make real processes better, and we want to be very careful about how it's being sold to us and what we're going to do with it and everything else. But there's, as a research tool, it's an amazing thing. And it's,
Yeah, the ability to filter and quickly surface good data is an unlock. And tying this back to those who are worried about the private-public partnership between little tech and the Trump administration, I think one thing to pick up on, particularly in recent weeks with DeepSeek, is particularly for like Mark Andreessen and others, sort of signaling, and Mark Andreessen's been on this, the CEO of Anthropic came out and said we need to essentially license AI and the models and make sure they're closed sourced. And there's a strong contingent within this little tech sector saying, no, we want the open source models, and the open source models are going to win in the long run. We need to ensure that they have the ability to compete in the first place to ultimately win. And I think that's where the signal is. As long as the models are open source, the weights are open source, and anybody can run them on servers that they control, that's all that matters.
AI is a tool. It's not a business model.
Yeah.
Just like the browser wasn't a business model, it was a tool. Right. We have to, I think that's the paradigm shift that people are beginning to realize. I think that's probably the biggest lesson from DeepSeek is that. And interestingly enough, this morning I read a thing about somebody said that, they were bitching about Apple, saying, for years everybody was like, oh, NVIDIA, this one, that one, they're all ahead of Apple and AI, and Apple was taking the slow route of building an AI, a decentralized AI that was personalized, right? Like the whole idea of your iPhone being a personal AI platform built for you, that's built around you and for you, and doesn't share its information and its data with anybody else. And now Apple's looking like a genius because, they're looking genius. And, again, had many a conversation with Dexter White about this. And when they first announced all this stuff, we had a long conversation about this. And he's like, yeah, this is exactly the model. And AI gets to be a tool and not a thing that somebody else controls. AI, they were building a business model for AI where they would control it, and the same way that they control every other form of communication and data store, and transportation, everything else. They want control of the wire. They always want control of the wire, because if they control the wire, then they control you. AI should be a tool for making your business better. It is not a business in and of itself.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Whatever that business happens to be.
Yeah, and I don't know how on top of you, but the Apple with their iCloud relay system that they set up actually got adopted by HTTP 3. That's like how innovative it was. And that's really good from a privacy perspective. Obviously, you have a secure enclave on your phone, so that adds a layer of privacy. But even at the GPU level now, Amazon, we're actually invested in a company working on this, but there's something called a Nitro enclave where you can make sure that the data between the GPU and the end user is completely end-to-end encrypted. You use some sort of decryption to make sure that you're accessing. You can run the compute, but the person managing the server has no idea. They just know the compute.
What's in the server? Right. Yeah, very important.
And that
model is going to win out because that's the model we want.
Yeah, and that Apple relay system, when you add something like that in, it makes it impossible to even know where the origination of the call to the server is coming from. So you have this like open,
and the whole World Economic Forum boogeyman.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, and you'll note the European Union is doing everything imaginable to push those doors open. The UK this morning came out and said to Apple, "You must give us a back door into your." And Apple's response is going to be, "Shit, we told we told the U.S. government to go scratch. What's England to us?"
Yeah.
So clearly, I fully expect Tim Cook at this point to just kind of look at Trump and go, Will you take care of this, please? Come on, don't worry about it.
Tariffs. I would not be shocked if there's tariffs threatened against the UK within the next 12 hours because of this.
Well, so it's almost 3 o'clock Eastern or 2. Yeah, it's 3 o'clock Eastern time. We got an hour and a half. We got an hour and a half before market close, or an hour before market close. Anything's possible. We should check our phones because every hour the next episode of the Trump Show drops, and the next webisode of the Trump Show drops, and boom, and these are hilarious. These little webisodes.
Like this is like what I'm seeing right now is President Trump at his press conference just said that he and VP Vance agree that the recently fired Doge employee should be rehired. So it's like, we don't even care about your...
So Scrotum Gate is over, as Scott Adams put it this morning. Big balls. So, and I am going to be on a kick that we should replace the Village People with AC/DC. Right. But I think, don't get me wrong. I have a soft spot for that friggin' song. I loved it when I was a kid, but I also love Big Ball. I also love Big Balls when I first got into AC/DC. It was one of my favorite AC/DC songs. That and a whole lot of Rosie. Balls. Yeah. I've got big balls. I was listening to it this morning. I was just giggling. And for anybody who hasn't seen the episode of The Charismatic Voice with Elizabeth Jaroff, I don't know if you follow her on YouTube. She's lovely, and she does the vocal analysis. She did Big Balls. It was just very demure. Elizabeth was just hilarious.
It's funny.
It was a good episode.
I've been on an AC/DC kick recently, and I watched the music video for "It's a Long Way to the Top." If you want to rock and roll for the first time, I didn't realize he was actually playing the bagpipes. It's very impressive.
Yeah. That one's been making the rounds recently. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think after I get done, I have another podcast in about 20 minutes, so we need to run. But I think I'm going to be sitting down with Back in Black on the drum set this afternoon while my wife's at her pottery class. I think that's what I'm going to do. Got to lock my time in. Playing AC/DC, I'm playing it note perfect on the drums. It's like, as in martial arts, it's the thing about white belt form. When you're a white belt, you learn your white belt form, and when you're a white belt, you're just hoping to get through it and memorize it. But when you're a black belt, or in my case, nearly a black belt, you're now trying to do it perfectly. Right? That's what you work on. When you still do white belt form, but now you're trying to do it perfectly. And perfect is fucking hard. I got news for you. AC/DC drum tracks are really, really simple. But you got to play them perfectly because every note is intentional relative to the rest of the arrangement. And so there is no room for improvisation. You have to do what he's doing, and you've got to do it perfectly. So it feels like white belt form, but it's really, really important. So it's a good exercise.
Sounds like the great way to end the week. This was a great conversation. I know you've got another one, but for me, this is my last conversation of the week on the show. So thank you for doing it.
You're welcome. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon, Marty.
Can't wait. Peace and love, freaks.